As a battery technology startup, how fast should you scale? Today's guest, Damien Despinoy, has the benefit of assessing and investing in energy businesses prior to co-founding Volexion in 2020. As the CEO, Damien talks us through their growth activities to date and what the future holds for them, providing insights on ideal scaling pace. He gives his assessment on the current investment landscape across the battery industry, as well as talking us through their widely compatible drop-in graphene encapsulation technology at Volexion. Damien, let's take charge. Damien, welcome. Thank you for coming on the show.
Well, thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. Really looking forward to today's episode, getting into your background in investment before founding Volexion. So let's get straight into things. Damien, talk me through your background first of all, before founding Volexion.
Yeah, absolutely. Good morning or afternoon, everyone. My name is Damien Despinoy. I'm the co-founder and chief executive officer of Volexion. My background is I'm a chemical engineer originally. I was born, raised, educated in France. I took a passion for energy immediately during my chemical engineering studies, which is why I joined. First job in my career was with an oil company called Total. So I started my career in France with them, then moved over to the US, and then went back to Europe for a few years. In that process, I also wanted to go back to business school, so I did an MBA, and after that, I joined the strategy consulting firm McKinsey and Company in Chicago, and I knew I always wanted to go back to energy. I always had that appeal to and that passion for the energy industry. So after my time at McKinsey, which was a great learning experience, I joined the venture capital fund Energy Foundry, also in Chicago, which was one of the few funds at the time specialized in investing and backing up entrepreneurs in the new energy economy. They had been doing that for a number of years, so they were very experienced. So it was great for me to be able to gain additional experience with such great investors. And I launched for them their consulting services essentially. So I was both doing deal flow and due diligence for new energy and new deals that they were considering, and also engaging corporate partners in identifying trends that were relevant to their activity in the innovation landscape, so that they could engage with the right companies at the right time, essentially. And so that's during the course of this work, essentially, that I met Professor Hersam, the inventor of Volexion's technology. And I really enjoyed my time in the investment space because I could see a lot of cool company. I was always amazed by the degree of innovation and drive that entrepreneurs can put in their adventure. And so I happened to meet one of them who was looking for a business person to ignite the business. So we talked a lot with my employer at the time, Earth Foundry, which used to be called Energy Foundry, and it was actually quite a reasonable match because their mission is to back entrepreneurs that they think have the potential, and the ideas that they think have the potential. So it was sort of a three-way co-founding situation between my academic co-founder, Professor Hersam, myself, who wanted to drive the business, and the investment fund who wanted to find additional opportunities and entrepreneurs to back, essentially. So that's how I jumped ship, and now I've been with Volexion for 4 years now, driving the technology development, business development, partnerships, fundraising. Well, at an early stage startup, which I think we're going to talk about later during this show, you wear multiple hats. That I can definitely testify about that.
Great. A really interesting dynamic, having that time working in a way where you're identifying technologies and companies to invest in before then establishing your own. We had a previous guest, Robert Nevert, at Ionabel, who did something similar. He was 10 years in venture capitals before founding his own business with a partner similar to you. So congratulations and good luck. I guess that 4 years has flown by.
Um,
Talk us through your technical focus in a bit more detail.
Yeah, so what we do at Volexion is so we work in batteries, and currently we work on lithium-ion batteries, and we use a nanomaterial that's been hailed as the holy grail of new material that's called graphene, discovered only actually 20 years ago. So it's still a relatively recent discovery on the time scale of material science. And the innovation that we are really deploying at Volexion is to be able to combine graphene and really being able to couple it to a surface very tightly to a surface of a variety of substrates. So we essentially are able to really stick graphene to any surface. And in our case, we apply it to lithium ion cathode materials. And so I was mentioning graphene has been hailed as the one of the holy grail of new materials because it has superior mechanical properties, superior electrical properties, and superior thermal properties. And so we are able to leverage all these advantages of graphene to be able to concurrently protect the surface of the material because batteries are a very difficult environment, very corrosive, very oxidizing. So the graphene provides this superior protection compared to other treatments. And on top of that, we also bring along the electrical conductivity and thermal conductivity benefit of graphene. So it's really this dual value proposition that we bring to particularly cathode materials is better stability and better electrical conductivity. And the way we think about stability is when we apply our technology to cathode materials, we always see a significant improvement in cycle life because we protect the material and intercalate a chemically neutral surface between the electrolyte and the material, and also keep things in place. Superior cycle life improvement in safety because we prevent oxygen from being released from the material, which in case of an event like a fire tends to fuel the fire and makes things worse. So we kind of prevent accidents from escalating. And we also enable high voltage operation, which is a big trend in the lithium-ion battery industry. Everybody wants more energy in the same volume or mass. One of the ways to do that is to increase the voltage. So that's really on the stability front, the way we think about the technology, and on the conductivity front. Here we like to partner with battery suppliers and manufacturers so that they can take advantage of the electrical conductivity benefit of our material to improve the design of their electrodes, essentially. And then there's potential to significantly reduce inactive materials so that you have more active material, which means more energy storage per unit of mass. High power density and rate capability and fast charge also is one of the advantages that we bring to the industry. And there's also finally a big trend in the industry, which is enabling dry manufacturing and dry coating for lithium-ion batteries in order to eliminate NMP, which happens to be a toxic solvent. So having the conductivity pre-distributed on the material as you are about to make your electrode definitely helps with this aspect of enabling dry coating operation. I've talked a lot, I think, but I think our solution is a relatively easy to implement solution that brings a lot of benefit to the energy to the lithium-ion battery industry, particularly cathode, which have been, in our opinion, relatively underserved by innovation over the past 10 years. So we position ourselves in a innovation white space to bring an incremental solution that can deliver huge benefits, essentially.
Nice. Before your MBA, I appreciate you were a chemical engineer, so I know you can
Mm-hmm.
speak to these things quite nicely. You mentioned that it allows for dry process, which is great. We had again a previous guest, AM Batteries, talk about their dry process and the advantages. There's so many advantages to dry process. Does your technology also interact with wet process? Is it compatible with wet process?
Yes, so our technology is as drop-in as it can because we alter the surface of the material, but the material that comes out of our process, sorry, has exactly the same form factor as what came in. So our positioning in the supply chain is as the last step of cathode material manufacturing or as the first step of battery manufacturing. And that can be in dry coding situation, but that can be in traditional electrode coding situations as well, which are NNP based. So it's a very flexible technology that brings, from what we see and from the feedback we're getting, some significant benefits.
Very good. And before we move on to your time and investment and how that's, because the whole concept of this show is how fast do you grow as a business. Talk me through your encapsulation process.
Yeah, so that's the second aspect that makes our technology interesting, excuse me, and differentiated. So I was mentioning that we use graphene, it has been called the wonder material. The problem and the challenge that graphene has had in the past is that it's very hard to scale up without losing some of the fundamental properties of the graphene. So you either get a solution that's very high quality, but that's not scalable based on vacuum-based deposition, for example, such as chemical vapor deposition, or you get a degraded performance version of graphene, which is typically based on graphene oxide and reduced graphene oxide, which also has challenges because you need to bring in some acid and some oxidizers to make these products. So from a sustainability and environmental performance, it's also a challenge. So you have these two ends of the spectrum. Our inventor, Professor Hersam, who's one of the worldwide experts in graphene, shot in the middle and developed a process that allows us to make graphene in a scalable fashion without the use of harsh chemicals, essentially. So we get essentially the best of both worlds because we have a highly scalable way to make the graphene, deploy it on cathode material, and with the properties of the best variety of graphene, essentially. So I should mention, so for the audience, yeah, everything that we do at Volexion is based on it's solution based. So all the processes and equipment that we use are of the chemical type and not of the discrete manufacturing type, which means that it scales very easily towards the very high volume that the EV industry is trying to achieve, essentially.
Perfect.
So liquid-based process in very mild conditions. That's how we deploy the technology. So it's a lot of clever tricks that have been deployed and invented over the years to make this technology comes to life. I can't claim ownership of any of these inventions, by the way. I was relatively late to the game.
Well, I'm putting you on the spot here with these technical questions, so I appreciate the insights there. To, I guess, switch to your personal focus, because I guess you came in, you've had this experience of identifying opportunities and scalable businesses and things like this. So, what has been your personal focus over the last 4 years at Volexion?
What has been my personal focus at Volexion over the past 4 years? I think it came in phases. First of all, because when I joined the company, I was full-time employee number 2. So there was the company did exist, but it was essentially grant funded, and it was a one person operation. So setting up the strategy, setting up the real baseline for how we were going to scale that business, figuring out how much the technology was going to cost, so developing all these basic tools that are needed and required for fundraising, essentially, was my initial focus. So strategy and developing the strategy and developing the tools that support the strategy. Then you enter the fundraising mode, which means you need to have a lot of conversations with a lot of investors. That process takes, for us, it took almost a year, I would say. So after the strategy was established, it took, even though we had some backing and some connection, getting our seed round closed took essentially a year. Once you have the money in the bank, then you need to bring the team on board. And that was actually an interesting challenge for us because I essentially joined the company 1 week before the COVID crisis hit, which means there was a lot of a lot of frictions in the job market at this time with a lot of remote working, but we happen to be working in a lab, so we can't actually do remote work. So getting the right team on board. Any entrepreneur is going to tell you that that's the most important thing that you can do and the most difficult thing that you're going to do. And I can confirm that. So I spent a lot of time uh, not only hiring technical profiles, but hiring the right people with the right mindset to be able to be flexible and continue the technology development. So that was a big focus of mine. Um, yeah, where are we in the question? So, setting up the foundation, fundraising, hiring, then you need to find a place of performance. So our lab was at Argonne National Lab at the time, but the agreement was expiring. So we had to find a lab, then we had to acquire the equipment and so on and so forth. So that was a lot of the focus for the past, in the beginning, in the first, 12 to 18 months with Volexion. And since then, my focus has been more on finding the right partners, whether on the cathode material manufacturing or on the battery manufacturing, to help us with the technology development, which means giving us guidance, testing the product, and giving us feedback, and then trying to move to the next step, which is joint development agreement. So we're getting very close to these. Getting very close to these milestones. So that's I'm pretty excited about that as well.
Very good. Joining the company just before COVID is a interesting timing. We're going to talk about the pace of growth and the decisions you make to bring certain functions in house. I guess COVID meant that it took maybe some of those options out of your hands. But before getting into that, from your time in investment, what were the biggest lessons you brought with you to ensure that you're going to succeed at Volexion?
Interesting question. Very interesting question. I would say there's two things that I took away from my time in the investment world that I deployed with some success at Volexion, and hopefully that will continue. I think the first one, and this opportunity was given to me because I was able to see a lot of deal flow coming through the investment fund, is to identify a business that has the potential to be differentiated. So, for example, a lot of the solutions in some subsectors were essentially variations of the same thing, right? And with Volexion, I really found a very unique solution that addresses problems that are real for the industry. So there's really the time in investment. It did allow me to get this overview of the landscape and being able to identify where an innovation could be positioned to be for maximal success. I think that's lesson number one. The other thing that I took from my time in investment is actually going to be counterintuitive, but it's to learn how to be scrappy and to learn how to raise the proper amount of money when you need it in relation to your to where you really are as a company. So for example, you always hear about the headlines. Such company raised $250 million, and you hear the big numbers and the headlines essentially. But what's really important as a company and as an entrepreneur is to make sure that the capital that you are able to raise is put to good use. And so for me, that means focusing sometimes on metrics that are hard to translate into outside measures of success. So, we made the decision to keep the company pretty small as long as we were in the research and development phase. And we work very hard on our processes so that we accelerate the time it takes for us to make a material, test it, give feedback. And so we put a lot of time in our automation, streamlining our processes, as opposed to bringing people on board and bringing more and more resources that would then be not always not always deployed in the best way to drive the problem forward. So we um, really made that decision to stay small for until the time was right to scale up, essentially. And we're getting to that point, which is pretty exciting.
Nice. Yeah, we'll get into pace of growth. First of all, I want to learn about your most exciting success story during your time in investment. What can you share?
Yeah, so there's a story that I like during my time at Energy Foundry. So as I was mentioning, I was leading and starting the consulting activity and the market intelligence activity essentially, which was uh, to analyze trends that are happening in the clean tech innovation landscape and also engage corporate partners. So we had one client when I joined, and one of the goal was to obviously grow this portfolio. I think the story that I like the most about my time as a strategist and consultant for an investment fund is my business development activities and the relationships that I built during the 3 years I was driving this activity uh, did not immediately led to additional consulting engagements except for one-off, but no real partnerships. But what I like and what I'm proud of is that after relatively shortly after I left Volexion, actually, after I left for Volexion, my former boss called me and was like, "Man, we're getting so many calls right now based on the work that you've done. Do you want to come back?" And so that was that was a moment of pride, you know, and that's to me, it's also reflective of what we see in the early stage for startups is that sometimes it's really hard to predict how long it's going to take to close a deal, how long it's going to take to get the validation, how long it's going to take to build the relationships. But as long as you keep your head to it and continue working hard and stay true to what you believe in, then there is a successful outcome. And actually, I think this activity is doing pretty well today, partially based on some of the work that I did in the early stage. So that gives me a sense of pride.
Nice. And on the flip side, maybe from some of the companies you worked with, what was the biggest mistake that you witnessed? And then ultimately, what do you learn from that you're taking into your time at Volexion?
Yeah, so I was at the investment fund from 2018 to 2021. Um, I think the biggest mistake that I've witnessed was the tail end of the cheap interest rate that led to some outsized valuation, and there was also the big wave of SPAC in the 2020-21 timeframe, where a lot of companies went public at valuations that were completely unreasonable. And we've seen that, you know, including some of them were potential, you know, EV startups, which raised a lot of money at valuations that seem attractive as an entrepreneur, obviously, because you want to raise as much money as you can in relation to your goals while preventing dilutions. But now they are reaching the tail end of that money, and getting to the next level of valuation is going to be pretty challenging for some of them. And we're seeing some of these warnings popping up now in the headlines. And I think this trend could have been anticipated uh, because it's not really very different from what happened during clean tech 1.0 essentially. The reality is that if you're doing a hardware business, it takes a very long time to bring anything to market and to sign these agreements and get the revenue in the door. So some of the frenzy that was happening in the 2019 2020 timeframe in the market, particularly when it comes to hardware company, I think this we're going to pay the price of this in the next few years, and that could have been somewhat anticipated.
Interesting. Let's get into pace of growth. You mentioned before staying small on purpose until you're ready. So, talk me through your current pace of growth and why.
Um, our current pace of growth is for now. It's, as I was mentioning, we don't necessarily focus on outside metrics such as headcounts and stuff like that, because we are late stage research and development phase essentially. And so what we've been working on, so we are a team of 5 full time. And so what we have been working on is essentially internal metrics to show our internal growth. And as I was mentioning, it's about what is the yield of the graphene manufacturing? How fast can we do the encapsulation and get the early result in the door? So we've been working a lot on these internal processes so that each of us on the team can be essentially more productive on a day-to-day basis, and so that's been a big focus of us, as opposed to hiring more people and essentially doing more. The risk is if you grow too fast, essentially, is that you're going to do a lot of manual work as opposed to automating some of the tasks that could be automated. And so you end up not using your people's time wisely. And I think to me that's really important to me, is that we have scientists, we have engineers, these are smart people. They should be spending as little of their time as possible doing grunt work essentially. So we've done a lot of work on that, and so instead of growing the headcount over the past 2-3 years, we've been mostly focused on automating and streamlining our processes, which is exciting because now I don't see a lot of opportunities for us to further streamline. So that means our next growth stage is going to have to go through fundraising, hiring, and buying equipment, which is probably going to come up later this year.
Very good. So becoming super efficient, looking at as many processes as possible to become automated, and then okay, we have the right systems in place, the right foundations. Now we can grow. So I guess
Mm-hmm.
that's how you
Yeah.
structure things.
And that worked well for us because we were in technology development and optimization mode. So not quite yet fully in commercialization mode. Now we're reaching the end of the product development phase, which means commercial engagement, which means that we are definitely going to need to scale up our processes on the technical side, but also on the commercial side as well. So there's definitely going to be some changes coming for us in the near future.
Great. If you have three, what are your top three processes that you've automated that have made the biggest impact on efficiency? They could be commercial or technical.
Yeah. So when you work in batteries, so there's the material side of things, and then there is the testing side of things. So to test the performance of your battery, you have to make a prototype battery that's typically a small format battery, such as a coin cell, and so it is a surprisingly complex process to nail, to go from material to prototype battery, because it's a multi-step process. So you have to mix, you have to dry, you have to calendar, you have to put it in the battery, and then you have to test it. And each of these steps is an opportunity for variation, which means that getting the right answer from this test is actually quite complex to have. So we've done a lot of work on optimizing this process, narrowing the variability that we get from the testing, and also accelerating the pace at which we can go from material to coin cell. Because some of these processes were inherited from the university where we come from, essentially, where timing is a little less important than in a startup. So some of the some of the drying processes, for example, would involve two 12-hour step. Now we've cut that so that we do a drying in 15 minutes. So that means in the same day in 2 days we can make the material and get it started on testing, essentially, for a process that was essentially definitely a week-long process in the past. So that's one that we've put a lot of effort in. The other one is to also perform our encapsulation. So we have the graphene precursor that we mix in proprietary ways with the cathode material. There used to be, again, some mixing that was going on for hours and hours, and we found out that there was not a need to mix for hours. We could just mix it in 5 minutes, essentially. And so we've cut the encapsulation process from 3 days to less than a day now at this point as well. So we are that's definitely a big focus area for us.
Great. And then to ask a people-specific question, you mentioned you're five people now in the business. How do you gauge the right time to bring a function in-house? So maybe somewhere you have a consultant or consultants. When would you bring in those people in-house and add them to your full-time employee headcount?
So we do have a lot of advisors and experts in the battery industry, not only formal advisors, but also commercial partners that we engage with. When do we bring these functions in-house? I would say so far we haven't really had that particular case, because we've stayed focused on we've stayed focused on our core technology. So these functions have to be in-house, essentially. Now, if I were to bring some of my advisors in-house, the way I would think about it. So, sorry for the pause. That question caught me a little off guard, but I think I can try to answer it. At the end of the day, it's all related to the milestones that you're trying to achieve. So in our case, because we've streamlined our processes, our internal processes so much, we can drive commercialization with the resources that we have. Maybe just bring an extra set of hands in the team. That will be my vision. Now, where the other functions that we're going to need to bring in-house are going to be probably commercial development. And so what we look at is, in order to be in a good position to make a large sample for a company, we need to drive these relationships so that in 6 months we are ready to make a multi-kilogram sample, for example. So in order to start driving commercial engagement today, we should have hired 3 months ago, essentially. So we look at the master plan and we try to anticipate the timelines and the core functions that we need, and be proactive on that, essentially.
Great.
I'm not sure that answers perfectly the question, but at least that's the way I think about it.
No, it's good. It's a viable answer. And in terms of your top 3 must-dos, so when developing a growth strategy, what are your top 3 must-dos?
Customer. That's about that simple.
Nice.
We are one piece. So energy storage is a fascinating space. We are one piece of the puzzle, but we definitely need a lot of help on a number of areas. And to me, that's going to be primarily driven by customers.
Nice. And then the other 3, what are the top 3 things that you don't do? And I guess that's going to be, forget about the customers.
Yeah. I'm not sure I can think of 3, but I can definitely think of 1. No, actually, let's do 2. One of them is, at some point, you have to decide when your product and your technology is good enough to get someone interested. It's very easy to get lost in never-ending iteration and over-optimization, internal optimizations of your product, as opposed to getting someone to give you feedback. Now you have to find the right balance, because if the product is really too early, you're going to get negative feedback and you're not going to learn enough. but there's a fine line that needs to be drawn so that you also get valuable feedback in a not completely finished product, because optimization can go on forever. I used to be an optimization engineer, so I know a little bit about it. So for me, that's lesson number one. The second lesson, and that's something we're working on a lot with the team, is to ensure that when we have disagreements on the technology roadmap, for example, and on what to do first, it's very easy to talk. These topics are complex, so it's very easy to talk past each other and forget and take a positional approach to negotiation and understanding, and then nobody reaches agreement. So it's very important to, instead of taking a positional approach, to really think about the interest of what every individual is bringing to the table. So, for example, we're in such a high learning environment. We could take the technology in many, many directions. We could work on the carbon, we could work on the electrode, we could work on the material, we could work on the graphene precursor. At some point, we have to, and everybody's got great ideas, by the way, and I respect and appreciate that. So my role as CEO and with my CTO is to make sure that when there is a discussion about should we go in that direction or this direction, then maybe the conversation should not be A or B exclusive, but say, hey, can it be B then A? Because at the end of the day, that's how you build the roadmap. So we're doing a lot of work on that to make sure that, and we're getting lots of success, by the way, with this approach. I would definitely recommend other entrepreneurs to use that. So yeah, that's how we maintain alignment, essentially, is to make sure that everybody's perspective are heard, but also sometimes decide that we're not going to do one project immediately. We'll do it later after we've fixed the other projects.
Great. Very good. And before we finish off, what do you prefer more, Damien? Working as a co-founder, or do you enjoy it previously working in investment?
So my background has always been in operations and being in the front line. So the answer is I like getting my hands dirty, and driving change essentially is a big motivator for me, and helping others drive change as well. I think I have more opportunities to do that as CEO, as opposed to being an investor and a backer of other CEOs, essentially. But that's really a personal preference. I don't think there's a right or wrong way to do that.
Yeah, maybe less sleep, but more satisfaction at times, and you have more control to create something, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It's about for me, it's all about driving change. It's important. I think we're at a critical time of the energy transition. In this role, I'm very fortunate because I have the opportunity to put all the skills that I've learned throughout my career, whether on the technical side, on the business side, on the investment side, bring them all together and drive some positive change.
Great. Exciting times ahead. And before we finish, what does the future hold for you and Volexion?
What does the future hold for me and Volexion? So for us, the immediate focus is we are in late stage R&D. Our immediate next focus is to go actively seek and close partnerships with industry partners across the supply chain, so that we can bring some value to these partners, whether they are materials manufacturers, battery manufacturers, or OEMs. So that our solution really brings the value that they were missing there. So really, that's our focus right now, is to identify and engage with the right partners with a strong interest in our technology, so that we can continue our scale up and continue delivering value for the industry.
Nice. Thank you, Damien. And as a closing tradition, and to make it a bit more specific around investment, I guess it's been a tough year, or maybe a tough 18 months as a whole. But in batteries, we've seen maybe a lack of investment, and certainly last year. How does the future look for the industry, and how do you think the battery industry will look in 10 years' time?
So I'm not sure I'm going to be able to answer the question in 10 years' time. Yes, I can probably share some perspective on 10 years' time. Um, so there is in terms of the battery industry, there's always the next big thing, right? But the reality is that these technologies are highly complex and take a long time to bring to market. So in 10 years, my prediction is that the battery industry is going to be relatively similar to what it is today. There will be probably some solid state technologies that come in play, and so on and so forth, and some lithium metal. So there will continue to be continuous innovation, but I think the batteries are going to look and operate in very similar fashion in 10 years than they do right now. Now, what was the other question? Sorry.
I guess from an investment outlook, how does that look?
Yeah, it's been as I was mentioning earlier. I think a little bit of what we're seeing right now is that we are paying the price of some of the frenzy that happened in the 2020-2021 timeframe. So I tie it to the economic cycle. The economy is not is doing relatively well right now. We're always afraid of a economic crisis. It appears to be more of a soft landing. So I think there will be capital available for solutions that are valuable to the industry, and that also are reasonable in terms of their growth rate, essentially.
Great. So positive, a soft landing.
Yeah, yeah, most definitely.
Great.
Maybe I can bring some color to that, by the way, because I don't want to seem like I'm not an innovator. We're obviously driving innovation, but in the field of material science, bringing a totally new system to the market takes about 20 years. So the technologies that will be there in 10 years, they either started their development 10 years ago, or they will not necessarily be commercial in 10 years. So I think, solid state batteries and silicon anodes and lithium metal anodes are well on their way to in the development cycle. So some of these technologies will definitely be available, and our solution is compatible with all these trends, by the way. But when you look at more emerging chemistries that are being currently actively looked at, I think 10 years is actually not enough time for these technologies to come to market.
Very good. No, I appreciate that. And yeah, fascinating as well that your model, the drop-in graphene encapsulation, sorry, it's compatible with all these different technologies. So for you, it doesn't matter, which one becomes commercialized, whether it's lithium metal or solid state, or whichever one takes off. Your solution is compatible with whichever one does. So I found it, before we spoke, I found it very fascinating, and thank you for talking us through the technical details, and also on growth of pace, and when to kind of scale and add different functions in house. So Damien, thank you very much. Good luck for the next stage of Volexion, and I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Well, thanks for having me.